Those of you that know me know I usually don't use notes, but the one time I wrote it all out because I want to get it right. We have no podium up here, so bear with me. I am Robert Mounts, and I want to welcome all of you. I'm president of the Matheson History Museum, and along with Caitlin Hoff-Mahoney here, our executive director, and in partnership with the Hippodrome Theatre, I'm really excited to welcome my friend Nell Page Rainsberger, actor and development consultant, and Robert, he says he goes by Bobby Robbins, production manager, lighting designer, two of the Hipp's longest serving leaders with theatrical predicates in your program that are too long to read, as they share the history of the theater. Nell just concluded another successful run as Virginia. Some of you may have seen it. I did in the play Native Gardens. But it just shows the talent that we have in Gainesville is extraordinary. From its inception in 1973, 50 years ago, the Hippodrome Theatre has brought stories to the stage that explore and celebrate the human condition. 50 years ago, 6 determined individuals, Marilyn Wall, Bruce Cornwell, Greg von Hausch, Kerry Oliver Smith, Mary Hausch, and Owen Wechsberg, took a leap into the unknown, creating a theater that challenged expectations. Are any of those folks here tonight? I thought so. Please be recognized. Stand up. And I know that Kerry is around. Great to have you. Through that? Okay. I'm reading what they gave me. I'm trying to read my lines. Throughout its history, the Hippodrome has pushed the limits of storytelling, creating memorable productions like Equus, The Elephant Man, Amadeus, The Royal, and The Mountaintop. And who can forget the many wonderful performances of The Christmas Carol? The Hippodrome Improvisational Teen Theatre, open stages, and the theater for young audiences brought innovative works beyond the walls of the theater and into the Gainesville schools and community, proving that theater is an important tool that can be used to explore deep issues, cultural and entertainment issues, and spark discussion. The building itself is iconic. Completed in 1911 when Chris Matheson was Gainesville's mayor, it served for many years as Gainesville's main U.S. post office, land office, and federal courthouse. Today, the building exemplifies what we call adaptive reuse and historic preservation, values we strongly support. Developers Ken and Linda McGurn and others have made the city blocks surrounding the Hipp a prime residential, cultural, and entertainment destination in Gainesville, no doubt. Tonight's event is sponsored in part by Visit Gainesville, Alachua County, and by the Department of State, Division of Cultural Affairs, the Florida Council of Arts and Culture, and the state of Florida. The Matheson is a nonprofit organization that is totally dependent upon grants and donations. And if you like, basically want to get to, if you like what you're doing here, board member Kim Mullins is at the back table. Please sign up and be a member and support the Matheson. So now enough about me, Nell and Bobby. As they say in the theater world, remember the show must go on. Good luck and break a leg.
So I have to say, I'm Nell Page. I have to say that I'm a little bit intimidated by having Bruce Cornwell here.
Yes.
Bruce is one of the founders, and I only say that, Bruce, because it's as if we have made up some of the family album stories. So please, if we get anything wrong, please correct us.
Unless, of course, the urban legend is better than the original story.
Yes, yes.
All right. Shall we begin? 50 years. Who'd have thunk? First slide, please. So this is a picture of the Hippodrome Federal Building being built. And you know, if you've been to the Hippodrome, you've actually seen these photographs. They're on the second floor in a composite at the top of the steps on the second floor lobby. What you have not seen is the blueprint behind it. So that blueprint behind it is actually a picture of an original, the original ink on linen print that the architect drew about half a year ago. A stack of blueprints fell in my lap, and they are the original blueprints of the building. And they actually came from Nell, who has a great story to tell, and actually how those survived are amazing. But within those blueprints, there's 15 plates. 13 of them are blue paper with white line. The earliest date is 1904. That's when the building was being planned and the land was being excavated for the building that started construction in 1909. But this is actually a front elevation of a picture of the original ink they drew on linen, not paper, on linen. And we have those. We have 2 of those. And they are now framed, and they will be presented on the second floor of the Hippodrome during the next show, Silent Sky, that celebrates our 50th, our actual 50th in April, on a permanent curated show on the second floor gallery that's going to showcase the historical architecture history of downtown Gainesville, including the Hippodrome. So look for that when you come to see the Hippodrome. And these are the different pictures of the Hippodrome throughout the ages. You know, these there used to be, I'm not sure if there still is, this company in Gainesville that made postcards, and they made like
orange
peach
crates,
like peach crates, art and posters. I'm not sure where they are anymore, but a couple of these look like that. I always like this one down here because it shows actually the building in use with cars parked when there was a street there, with no landscaping, no magnolia tree, no bushes. They built that building with no landscaping because back then they didn't want the landscaping to compete with the grandeur of the building. So no landscaping, just grass. So please. All right. So in 1963, the new courthouse was built, and also just by, you know, the downtown courthouse and post office next to the library was built in the same vein. First floor was the courtroom, or the first floor was the post office. Second floor and beyond that were the courtrooms. And more modern, 1963 during the Kennedy administration. So then the building kind of went into surplus for the government. It changed hands a few times, and the school board of Alachua County finally got it ended up in their hands, and they were there, I think, from the late 60s, at least in the 1970s. And they went ahead on the interior of that building, kind of did what they wanted to do on the interior. When it comes to historic landmarks, it's the exterior of the building that the government cares about. So the inside was kind of changed from post office. They added a bunch of hallways and doors and offices, and they used it for what they needed to. When that renovation occurred, there were these gas sconces that came off the wall, and that's because the building was pre-electric. It was everything was gas, and the gas sconces and the house lights, radiator heat. And now it's probably been 10, 15 years ago, this young gentleman from Newberry came up and said, I think you might want these. And he gave me these 2 brass sconces that were part of the building. And he said, my dad worked for the school board, and he found it in the garage after he died. So they were just sitting there, beautiful shape. And if you walk around the building, actually, the architect that did the renovation, El Dompe, used these sconces. They collected them, and he reused everything he could in that building. The sinks, the commodes, anything he could. And he took those sconces that were beautiful on their own, and he made actually lighting fixtures out of them. So if you walk up, especially on the second floor, you see these little globes on the wall. There's 2 of them. There's 2 sets, and they're throughout the building. So he kind of repurposed these sconces into modern lights. So you wouldn't really notice it unless you really look closely. I know the men's bathroom and the women's bathroom on the second floor also have those over the sinks. So with modern globes on it, but those are the original sconces, and actually it has the architect's signature orange blossom that's on those. Now, the orange blossom is repeated from the columns, the capitals that are on the columns, right? You can see it right there. So what was unusual about this is when I give tours, I say, what kind of capitals are these? And people are going, Corinthian, Ionic, what are they? So they're kind of a mixture, but what makes them unique is the orange blossom that the architect put on the face, on each face of the column. So next time you see the Hippodrome, look up and you'll see this big flower blossom, which is highly unusual for a classic column capital like that. And he repeated that motif throughout the building, in the floor, in the walls. You can see that. That's kind of where he added the circle around motif throughout the building, when the rest of the building is very structural, very square, straight lines. And so that's kind of a unique thing that you can look for next time you go to the Hippodrome.
So I'm going to do a little segue right here, Bob, while we're talking about Alachua County. This when it was owned by the Alachua County, I guess it wasn't owned, but they were housed there. Is that correct?
I think
the school board.
Then the school board.
Yes, the school board. So a very dear friend of mine, actually, it was her father had died, just like the sconces. They came back to us. And when he moved, he worked for the school board and he had an office there. And the school board was moving out and the Hippodrome was going to come in and do some renovations. And he took with him from his office, he cleaned out the back office and just took a lot of stuff, took it and put it in his garage. Well, just recently, my friend was cleaning out the garage at her mother's house and she called me. She said, "Now, I have something here. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but you might be interested." So I looked at him and my breath was just taken away. I thought, oh, this is amazing. So I brought him to the Hippodrome, and Bob, it was so exciting to see Bob's face because he does tours for that building and he was looking at it going, "That's what that is. That's where that is. Oh, I love this." So we know when Bob does a tour, historic tour of the building, he knows exactly what he is presenting to the public in terms of where things were, what the original idea was, even if there have been changes. So
absolutely, you know, it was these prints are, first thing I did is I digitized them. I took them to a reputable place in town, and they were able to run them through a scanner gently. So now they're digital. So they're, you know, I can share them with anybody, but in case the paper ever disintegrates. But there were things that I never knew about. You know, I thought, I think I know this. Like, I never knew that the third floor, the south side of the third floor where our offices are, actually were not offices. They were actually rooms that the courthouse used during trials. My office was a witness room. Your office was a petite jury room.
mm-hmm.
Next door was the grand jury room. There were 3 witness rooms, and that back stairwell of the Hippodrome that people don't usually see, we knew that that was a separate entity of the historical building. It was called the judge's stairwell. I always thought the judge walked up. Of course, it was a he, right? The judge walked up, and I knew the backstage area of the Hippodrome was the judge's chambers because our paint room back there is the judge's bathroom encased in marble. And now it's our paint room and prop room. But I never knew that actually citizens walked up that back stairwell and went into the offices, my office, your office, and sat there and waited for them to be called downstairs, the back stairwell, to enter into the courtroom. That was a revelation for me. I never knew that. So that was pretty cool. Yeah, well done on those prints. Beautiful. So it preserves, you know, it answers a lot of questions. And if you get a chance to see those, when we're going to post them on the internet, if anybody who's into architecture and drafting, I don't want to use this word coarsely, but it is architecture porn. The craftsmanship of the lettering and the drawing is phenomenal. Phenomenal.
So is that a quote, Bob?
That could be.
Okay.
It could be. I gave a disclaimer.
Any of you journalists out there, Bob,
they're stunning. So every time I show it to like local architects or anybody, even students, they're like, "Oh my goodness!" And we roll them out. They're like, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" So
there is a giving circle. This is just a little plug at the Hippodrome called Leading Ladies, and at the end of the year, we ask the heads of the department to submit an in-house grant request. And one of the and then we vote, the leading ladies vote on how they want to use the money that they, the portion of the money that they've donated to the Hippodrome back to the Hippodrome. And the number one grant request that the women wanted to fund was to frame the two original pieces. So we have those framed, and they I don't know when they're going to go up, but they will go up in a permanent home.
Right, on
have
the
a
second
permanent
floor.
home on the
And
second
what's nice
floor.
about that is that the leading ladies, the amount that they donated to be in that, to that fund enabled me to go out and not just go, nothing against it, the framing factory or some commercial. I went to Hector and had him design matting and frames. They're beautiful, beautiful. So to be able to bring other artists that aren't traditional theater people into the building, right, and have them permanently display their artwork in that building is a joy for us. So so look for them. In about 2 weeks, they're being on. So all right, Bruce.
Here you are, buddy. Right there to the left is Bruce Cornwell.
Yeah. So that's 5 of the 6. You know, Greg Hausch calls that Hippodrome 3, because that's actually the 3rd home of the Hippodrome, right? It started out, and we're going to show you, it started out on Hawthorne Road, and then it went to the warehouse on North 441, and then it came downtown at the time when, you know, downtown Gainesville was not functional. It was, the Oaks Mall had just opened a couple of years before that. Everything had moved west. Downtown was boarded up. University of Florida was still a small little school. You know, it wasn't the bar district that it is now.
So I just wanted to point out that this is not the original founders. This is a photograph that we're using. It's not all of them. Marilyn Wall is not pictured in there. She was one of the original founders. Oren is not in there, and Marshall New with the in the back is not one of the original founders, but he was in that. So yes, they were all part of the team, but not the original ones. And, you know, one of the things that Bob had shared is this was the 3rd home that we had. And one of the pieces to remember, and some of you might remember this if you've been in Gainesville for a long time, but in 1973, when the Hippodrome started, it was the theater scene in Gainesville was very limited. It was the University of Florida Constance Theater that had just recently opened, and then there was the community theater, but there wasn't a lot of alternative theaters that were cropping up in town. The Hippodrome came, and it was like the perfect storm. Bruce likes to say that it's a good thing they didn't know what they should have known, because otherwise they never would have pursued like they did. And in 1973, they were able to start a theater that was, the town was ready for it. And it was doing avant-garde theater that was not a 3-act play. The University of Florida was doing 3-act plays. That was pretty standard at the time. I remember when they started doing 2-act plays, we were like, whoa, 1 intermission. And then it was 1-act plays. It would go through. So it was the beginning of a lot of changes in theater throughout not only in the United States, but throughout the nation. And the Hippodrome was on the cusp of that. I say the founders were on the cusp of that, of really driving it forward. And because Gainesville is such an intellectually driven town with the University of Florida and now Santa Fe, that there were interested faculty, there were interested students, people were curious about this group of artists that were out on Hawthorne Road producing high quality theater with no money. And this is where the first home was, right here. We always call it the 7-Eleven, but Greg Hausch informed us that it was a plumbing supply store. And that was my first year that I was actually fortunate enough in 1973 to have a progressive father who, in my senior year at high school, said to me, would you like to go to the Hippodrome? It's this theater out on Hawthorne Road, but we have to bring our own pillows to sit on. And if it's cool, we'll need to bring a blanket. So I said, sure. Went out to the Hippodrome and I was mesmerized. And then my first year of college in 1974, I was doing a play, Antigone, and Greg Hausch came up to me and said, you know, you really should audition for the Hippodrome. Well, I was so scared. I made my roommates, who had no business, and some of my cousins, no business auditioning, but it gave me the courage to audition for Murat Saad. And Bruce Cornwell, God bless you, cast me in the lead. And at the time, it was a controversial play. There was, pardon? Yes. Well,
Came back around, didn't it?
there was no internet. There, you know, people, there was no way to see film except in a film, you know, house. So at the Florida Theater, they were showing a production from London of Murat Saad, and they had a panel, and my father happened to be on the panel to, I guess, discuss, you know, some of the politics of that and how it was relevant at the time.
And now, what did your father do?
And my father was the Episcopal minister here in town at Holy Trinity Church. And but he was very curious about a lot of things. So I called him. I went home, called him, and just cried and said, I don't know who this person is. I don't know anything about the French Revolution. Oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I guess by the grace of God, something happened, and then, you know, my life at the Hippodrome began. But that's one of the things I think that makes part of the Hippodrome so relevant, is where the cultural scene in Gainesville was. It was not the hub that it is today. The Hippodrome was really one of the cornerstones of helping drive the standard of excellence for the work that we do here up.
And not only that, but then when the Hippodrome moved into HIP 3, the downtown became, I consider the cornerstone of the downtown redevelopment at the time. You know, I mean, there was Cox's Furniture, Mike's Bookstore, the Sovereign had just kind of opened. There was
Lillian's.
Island, Lillian's, music store. Was a music store then, and that was about it. There wasn't much else. Chestnuts, you know, but you know, so the Hippodrome moved downtown, and that, to me, that really started the downtown renovation. All right. You know, that first season, 7 shows, you know, that's gutsy. No one's getting paid. There's no money for anything. They're renting an old storefront out on Hawthorne Road, which is back then was probably getting out there, right? Even though it was East Gainesville and that's the original side of Gainesville, but that was starting to get out of town, right? So for them to be able to do that, it's pretty remarkable, and to have the guts to do that. Now, as Nell said, the quality was pretty quick, and the growth of that quality continued.
I just wanted to point out that this is Bruce Cornwell right here, just in case he thought he was going to get away with something. No. Oh, no.
No.
No, there you go.
And if any of us know Dan Jesse, Dan Jesse, he's in that lower left corner in the caretaker down there.
Yes.
Yep. Next slide, please. And you have to hit it again. So these are just going to come kind of catch you. So this is, some of us might be old enough to realize what form that media is in. It's a reel-to-reel. That's an audio reel-to-reel of the soundtrack to The Land of Point, which is considered the Hippodrome's first production. It was a children's production that they did. I found that tape behind a bookcase in the booth. And then later, it got lost again, and I found it. You're never going to believe this. When we renovated the lobbies 2 years ago through our Wild Spaces Public Places grant, we were renovating the second floor lobbies, and where those mirrors were with all the benefit, we took those out, we renovated those walls, and at the bottom, that sat in the case, still protected. So we lost it. So next slide, please. And that's Land Point at the Gainesville Mall. If anybody remembers the Gainesville Mall, Sears, right? Next. That's Marilyn and Greg.
So Greg Hausch and Marilyn Wall, both founders.
Next. You know, it was a little different time back then. You know, a little bit more of the maybe not circus, but dell'arte and, you know, children's theater and trying to form their own way, figuring out how to do that. And of course, uh, uh, pointing towards children and education and enrichment on the education side seemed to be the logical way to go. And to me, it still is today, that's really how theater can really transform. Back to the caretaker. Next one. There we go. Hipp 2. Hipp 2. So during that small amount of time that they were in Hawthorne, they were able to, you know, you can read the stories on the Hippodrome's webpage now. We're doing a history of the Hippodrome through the decades. Each decade has its own narrative. And they were saying that by this time they were able to pay each other, what, $25, $50 a week? A week? Something like that?
Did we get paid?
Back then, I think it was pretty close to the warehouse days where there was a little bit of money.
Jennifer, did you get paid? I don't think I did. I think, yes.
Right. So, you know, that warehouse still sits on the northwest corner of 441 and Northwest 53rd, you know, back toward next to where the old Sears repair place was. But, you know, that's known because it's a metal roof. And when it rained real hard, you know, they had to kind of stop the action on stage. But what was good about the stories on that facility was that they were able to move seating around and kind of more of a black box theater and rearrange the space to each show as compared to how the Hippodrome is now, where it's fixed seating, the stage is fixed, and the viewpoint is always fixed. Just so we know, so this logo right here actually turned up today in our staff meeting. So this logo was just learned today, was the first logo of the Hippodrome. The first 1 or 2 years, they didn't have an official logo, no letterhead, you know, letters. They were just trying to survive. So if I'm not mistaken, Marshall drew that, and the significance to that, to me, is that it's a comedy tragedy takeoff, where it's the outside, the clown of happiness, even though it's kind of a little Clockwork Orangey, but the clown, and then the inside is Hamlet with a skull and a sword. So to me, I read comedy tragedy in a 1974, 1975 motif. So, right? Okay, good. All right,
So that wasn't the first season there, though, was it, Bruce? Oh, the third season. That's right.
Well, this is the third season
Okay.
total, but was this 75 would have been the first time you were in the warehouse, right?
And that was the first season of the warehouse? Okay. I just wasn't sure.
So that's still standing on the corner of North 13th Street and 53rd Avenue. It's on the northwest corner of that intersection. Yeah, it's still blue. The sign is gone. The sign was up probably 10 years ago. Portions of the sign was up 10 years ago. But you know, pine trees are now there. And now I've been in there actually since the Hippodrome was in there. And it's a self-storage warehouse. At least last time I was in there. Yes, sir. Right, because the story is you only had a ladder so tall, and then you put steps on these telephone poles to get out there with no ropes, no nothing. I've seen a picture of Greg Hausch out there dangling by his toenails, putting up these ladders. Right, so dedication, crazy dedication. Next slide, please.
Okay, so I just did a little check, and that is not the first season in the warehouse. Thank you. Yes.
There you go.
So 75 was Scuba Duba. That's what we did. And so, yeah, that was the first one, Scuba Duba, Midsummer Night's Dream.
So this is actually the space where the
That was the
Hippodrome
first one.
grew for the next 5 years, that really expanded their national prominence. And this is really where the foundation of pushing the boundaries, demanding for excellence, really was birthed, maybe not birthed, but really was cultivated in this space, in my opinion. So because of this, Hippodrome was able to garner national recognition, national NEA, back when, the government gave money for the arts and supported the arts on a federal and state level.
So it got the recognition. And Bruce, you had a wonderful story. I know it seems like there was somebody from the NEA that came to see. Was it Equus? What did they come to see at the Hippodrome that you were talking? Oh, okay.
Wow.
All right. Right. Pardon? Yes. So repeat what Bruce said.
So a national representative was summoned to look at the Hippodrome and their book of work, and to decide if they're going to get grant money or not from the National Endowment of the Arts.
The production that was recognized was a production that was done at the first location, a production called PAP. And so we were starting to get recognition from a production that was done at that small theater.
And what does that say? Back in those days, Gainesville was tiny, right? Tiny comparatively. So these big rigs coming from DC or wherever they were coming from to view a little theater startup
on Hawthorne Road.
Right, on Hawthorne Road.
That at the time was not developed like it is now. So
yeah.
Okay, so he was visiting. Okay.
Oh, that's great. So you kind of
Yes.
snapped this national rep and said, "Hey, let's." And he was like, "Oh, something's happening here in Gainesville."
So Bruce, I think you should sit up on this front row. So
Yeah.
for the meeting. I'm serious, because there's people that are actually watching this online, and that way, when you have something to say, then
This is great.
then
Can you
we
move to
can
the next
just
slide, please?
we can make you stand up here.
So there we. Oh, question, yes.
There's a story there.
Just a little background here. So the Stearns are in the audience, and the Stearns were from supporters of the Hippodrome from the beginning. They owned a record store, combination record bookstore, where that was the only place you could really buy tickets to the Hippodrome at the time. And they were in every program for decades. So we're honored to have you here.
Yay, thank you.
So there's pretty good history in this room right now.
Yeah.
Wait. Yours. Hold on. Do you remember?
Rebel discount.
Rebel discount. Yeah. Not the Rebel House. Rebel discount. Right? So Equus seems to be a landmark production that garnered a lot of airplay and accelerated the aura of the Hippodrome and the artistic no boundaries and the dedication to just putting out there and all hell and everything else be damned. So that started. They took great leaps in that production. Mark Sexton as a young youth, then starring in the play. It's interesting. I saw the revival of Equus 10 years ago on Broadway with Daniel Radcliffe from Harry Potter, and it was done in the round with an audience above the back of the theater, and it was brilliant. I never saw the Equus production here, but that show, is really brilliant. Yes, sir.
Bruce, do you know who directed it? Bruce directed
Bruce
it.
directed that
Yes.
show.
Yeah.
You know, there was at that time there were six of you, six of you, including Marilyn, and they did everything. They directed, they acted along with other actors in town. They produced it. They did the costumes, the what little bit of lighting that there was. They did the props, the scenery. You know, they did everything. They decided on cleaned the toilets, took out the trash. I mean, seriously, they did everything, repaired the roof. So it wasn't, you know, the conglomerate of 40 employees that we have now. It really was much smaller. And they were producing on a large scale. Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah, Carlos.
So they're made out of leather and then they're welded together.
Those are still somewhere. Where did those land up? Are they still in the building? I think,
Are they?
do you have one? Then they're still in the building. We still have them. I've seen them, along with the rhinoceros heads. So that was a big event. You know, it's actually that show is on the wall of the Florida Theater, the Great Southern Music Hall, because when Equus was produced, they toured it, and one place they toured it was the Florida Theater back when it was a 800-seat movie theater with probably a tiny stage at that time. Yes, so and it's on the wall right there. Next slide, please. So this is a letter from Kim Tuttle. Kim Tuttle is the founder, one of the two founders of Dance Alive. Dance Alive, if you don't know, real quick, you know, professional dance company here in town for 53 years, power excellence. And she wrote a letter back, this is during Equus, so that was in 78, 79. 77. Well, the tour. But the tour
the tour.
Right, in the floor. So, but anyway, that's on there. So she wrote, you know, I'm not going to read it, but for a fellow artist to write that is amazing. And now Kim's producing, you know, they're producing stellar work with Dance Live. If anybody got a chance to go see Swan Lake just recently at the Phillips Center, it was a beautiful production, classical. So I really appreciate it. I took a picture of this. I'm also the lighting designer for Dance Alive for the last 10 years. So I really appreciated what she said. Next, please. Yeah. Yep. Next. Next. I would say I've picked them up. I'd say
the masks are not very heavy.
Yeah.
If you could see, the shoes are very heavy. If you could see how they.
So the shoes were basically stilts. So the shoes had platforms about this tall. We still use them to this day for the Ghost of Yet to Come for Christmas Carol. Because it's a bigger ghost, they're on the same shoes.
So that's a horseshoe at the bottom.
Right. So we still have all those shoes at the Hippodrome in the costume shop. Yeah, exciting years of professional and artistic development for the company as it gained both national prominence and statewide support for its creative and imaginative approach to theater. There are so many pictures there of so many people that some of them are in this room. I can't keep track. Yeah. What is that? Is that the Tempest? The far left? Yes, great.
Lord Alfred's Lover right down there. I mean, not Lord Alfred's Lover. Is that ruling class, Bruce? Right there on the bottom? Right there on.
Is that you?
That's me.
Yeah.
I think it is. And in that show, Bruce played someone that actually had a knife and was, as an actor, was supposed to pretend as if he were stabbing me, but Bruce was into his part. And one night I went, oh my gosh, that really hurt, as the blood was running down my.
You know, being in theater, there's lots of those stories. I mean, Mike Beistel was notorious for injuring himself, and maybe others with rifles and things like that. So there was a show, Christmas, named something Christmas. Marilyn was in it. It was pigs. It was hysterical. And he had a knife he was whittling, and we're saying, you know, we'll give you safety training. He goes, no, I got this. Opening night, about took the tip of his finger off. So, and the show goes on, right? So notorious. All right, next slide. So these are just bits and pieces for when the Hippodrome was moving downtown. That was a kind of a big deal. They had to raise a lot of money. You know, a lot of money, $150,000 back then was a lot of money. I mean, to me, it's still a lot of money, but that was a lot of money. So they were going through the way that that happened, if I'm not mistaken, is that the building, there was a professor of architecture at the University of Florida, Harry, right? And he did a study with the students on the feasibility of turning the federal building into a cultural arts center. And the Hippodrome at that time was going, hey, we're stretching our wings. Hey, this can work out. The city, they all got together, long story short, and made it happen. But the Hippodrome had to raise a lot of money. I think the matching grant was some, right, I think a $360,000 number comes to my mind somehow. And they had X amount of time to do it, and they did it earlier, as I recall. But I remember things like crazy fundraisers in town, just crazy. Channel 20 doing hippothons on the television and doing fun runs and marathons and duck walks and all sorts of crazy things in town to get that money. And they did it. And like I said, not on the soapbox, but that's when the government was supporting the arts. All right, there we go. So, you know, this is the type of picture that is a little bit before my time, when this was still the courtroom of the federal building. White ceilings, all the original house lights were still there. So if you see, this is looking from on stage towards the back. So this would be section B, the center section. These three were the doors that when you entered, they were the double doors from the first, second floor lobby. You entered into the courtroom. They walled that off. They put a booth there, put windows up there. So that's a shot that I haven't seen too often. I do know that when they first moved into that space, especially on the third floor, all that beautiful oak wood that's on that floor, that's plastered everywhere, was all painted. And I know that you guys spent months hand scraping 100-year-old wood.
Was it that industrial green? Oh, gosh.
Right. So if you come up to the third floor on our tour, whenever you get a chance, you'll see it's just that whole floor is just this beautiful, now 115-year-old oak. Well, you got to figure that oak was milled before that. So, you know, 150-year-old oak is in beautiful condition with no paint. The new theater opened its doors in early 1980. Now, it opened with The Elephant Man, and that was a revival, not a revival, but a remount, because the Elephant Man actually closed the warehouse, or was that the last show? As You Like It closed the warehouse. So they did the Elephant Man, but they did it on the set of A Christmas Carol. So the Elephant Man set originally was A Christmas Carol with the windows in the back.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard's shaking head, so correct me.
Carlos repurposed stuff.
There you go.
And made like a permanent set or a recurring set or Christmas.
I'm sorry, I thought that's okay. Right.
So it was just the opposite.
Oh, sorry.
So-
That's
Carlos repurposed the Elephant Man set
Christmas Carol. That's
as
what I
a
meant to say.
classic Christmas Carol set that is down in Eustis. I
Yeah,
think.
so we used that set till about just before COVID. We used the same set. It was being held with duct tape and spit, literally.
Mhm.
And Carlos retired from the Hippodrome. He moved to Eustis, Florida, and he was the artistic director of the Walnut Bay Street Players down there, and we gave him that set. We were going to do a ceremonial burning on the loading dock of that set, and he goes, no, Bobby, no, I want that set. So we gave him that set. He still used that set. It's in Eustis, Florida now. So in 1981, the Hippodrome was designated as a state theater of Florida. Back then, before the Hippodrome, there were two state theaters of Florida, the Oslo and the Coconut Grove. The Hippodrome was the third out of four. The fourth one became the Cornwell Theater in Boca. There are only two of them left. The Oslo and the Hippodrome are the only two theaters left of that.
Hmm.
So the state theater is no longer a recognition, although we have it in our legal name now. So that was a recognition by the state of Florida for theaters that presented excellence in their community. And at the time, the Hippodrome Like I said, we were only the third one at its time. And the only thing that allowed us for the state, it gave us, hey, a pat on the back, but it did allow us to apply for grants and funding that other organizations weren't able to because of the stature of that. We still had to go out and hit, Tallahassee for that money, but that opened some doors. The theater enjoys recognition as one of the leading regional theaters in the country with the primary goal of providing the best season of theater for audience throughout the state. In maintaining this goal, the Hippodrome has become a major cultural resource to the community in the state of Florida, staging main stage productions for more than 60,000 people annually. So that's just the main stage. The founders thought of that building to be more than just a theater. So we have the cinema, we have a gallery, and now we have that basement, which used to be our warehouse, is now a rental facility, banquet facility, meeting space. We can rent the cinema. It's also our second stage for performances. All of our unplugged and our smaller performances are done in there. So it really has grown, not just from the main stage. Those are the original seats, into what it is now. Next, please. Another signature performance show of the Hippodrome was the Elephant Man. Now we did the Elephant Man recently in
This is the second one?
No, this is the first one.
Oh.
This is the first one still. Yep. Okay, next. See what we have here. That's Rena Carney, right? And I don't know who the other person is. All right, next slide, please. Next slide. So Kerry's in the background, right?
Yes.
And that is
Louis Terrell.
Louis Terrell, who went on to found a very successful theater in South Florida. And that's the Christmas Carol set. You can see the windows in the back. That's the refurbished Christmas Carol set. That we no longer use. So, all right, next. That show has a little bit of nudity in it, but back in the day, the Hippodrome found that, if we put a little nudity on stage, progressive, then hey, people are going to come see it because it was a big deal then. So it still is a big deal today for a lot of different reasons. The shows were written then to have impact, and nudity. Some nudity was one way to provide that impact. A lot of playwrights are shying away from that because it's been done, and nowadays, in my personal opinion, if we're going to do nudity, it really has to support the text of the storytelling. And if it does, that's great. If it doesn't, then it's a little gratuitous because we've been there.
Yeah, so Equus was a case that it was important.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, next, please. The Hippodrome today. The Hippodrome's history and vitality are built on its artistic achievement. The theater has produced more than 100 world, American, and Southeastern premieres in its history. In addition to its main stage season, the Hippodrome screens first-run domestic, foreign, limited release, and avant-garde films. The Hippodrome Cinema is Alachua County's longest-running cinema. The Hippodrome also houses an art gallery, which is available by invitation to Florida artists at no charge. So we changed that art gallery. Now it's just been renovated about every 5-6 weeks. There's a new show in there, and that's curated by Anna, who is our box office manager. She's also our gallery curator. She's also the one that's personally curating the permanent exhibition with those blueprints that's going to be on the second floor of the building, which opens in a few weeks. So some of those pictures, hey, we graduated from a black and white film to color. How about that, right? Next, please. So coming up, this April is the Hippodrome's 50th birthday. That's why we're here celebrating. We have an open house that's free to the public. It's Saturday, April 15th. We are closing down the streets in front of the Hippodrome. City of Gainesville is helping with this. There'll be police and barricades and all sorts of things. And in the streets, we're going to have different arts organizations from around town. We're booked out, so all of First and most of Marilyn Wall Way, which is second place, has tents. There will be artists in the middle of the street painting the front of the Hippodrome. Ellie Blair will be in the theater painting the Hippodrome. So please come down to that. Also inside, you'll be able to experience the inners workings of the Hippodrome. We're going to have events on every floor. from storytelling and perform live music performance in the gallery along with shorts, movie shorts, to the second floor where there will be rehearsals staged for the audience. We're actually in rehearsal of a show at that time. So it's like a day before our tech rehearsal. It's a little tight. It's a little tight. So that's for Silent Sky. So on a half-hour rotation, you can visit all these different parts of the theater. The third floor is going to have a free improv class with Matt Lindsay, who's great at it. The costume shop's going to be open to get your hands dirty and make some crafts and some masks with Aaron Jester, our resident costume designer. And then the basement is going to be open afterwards for a party with music and cocktails. So, and reminiscing. All of us old folks will be out there reminiscing. So we invite everybody to come down to the Hippodrome for the 50th, partake in what you want, and move freely through the building. We'll be fully staffed. We just had a 2-hour meeting today on it, and we're ready to open the building up for open house.
So one of the things that we, as the staff at the Hippodrome and the artist and the board, felt like it was very important. We are so fortunate to have a building to house the programs. And as we move forward, yes, we can look back, we can reminisce about the shows that we have done the first 50 years. But this next 50 years, it's cultivating a new theater audience. And the way we exist in the world has changed and will be changing. And so one of the things that we felt like at this particular fulcrum point, if you will, is to show or invite the community to this building that has so much stature, and it was built to be ominous. What we want to do is invite the public to say, come see the spirit, come be a part of the creativity that happens inside of this building. We want the community, we want everyone to understand how vital we all are in making this next change. So there's new programs that we have. We're developing a new playwriting festival program so that can have statewide and national attention. We're hoping to really have that on its feet in the next couple of years. We're hoping to develop more of the theater for young audiences, again, to be able to cultivate young theater goers. We have classes that are giving opportunity for young people, both young and hopefully adults, that have always thought about doing theater. And then of course we have the programs that already exist. So that's the reason we're having this open house. I went into the costume shop the other day, or a month ago, and I said, what are you doing? They had brown paper and they were literally making the patterns for the show Silent Sky, which is a period piece. It blew my mind because I'm thinking, you're cutting with the hope that you're going to put material down there and then sew it up and have it look like you have in your mind. It's pretty amazing what goes on there. And we wanted to make sure that everyone was a part of it.
It is. So what sets the Hippodrome different from the beginning, and I think this statement falls on the shoulders of the 5, 6, the founders that did everything. So this theater, still to this day, which is highly unusual, we have all of our designers in-house, on staff, on salary. So our costume designer is in residence, lighting designer is in residence, property, sound designer is in residence, video designer is in residence, meaning on staff, salaried, with benefits. We bring in local scene designers that we pull from our company that is they're local. There's 2 or 3 for them that we love to use, Actually, a little sidebar, our next designer is actually the chair of the theater department at the University of Georgia, and she's designing Silent Sky. She did the Tempest for us, not the Tempest, As You Like It for us. Julie, she's wonderful. But that's what makes the Hippodrome very unique. A lot of regional and Broadway, especially Broadway, but the large theaters and regionals, they don't have those staff members on staff. What they have is a strong production manager who goes out and hires the costume designer. They'll have a costume shop manager. They'll have a technical director that runs the shop and the scene shop and the carpet. But all the other designers are brought in ad hoc. They're paid, independent contractors. They're given a little transportation. They might need some housing. They're given one fee. They're in, they're out, they're gone. The Hippodrome is different. We're living and breathing every day. So our shortcut that as far as designs go, Amanda, some of us worked there a long time. So we have a shortcut in communication that enables us to go faster in production and to understand the collaborative process much clearer than it would be. Like, I freelance around the country designing lighting. And when I go into a new theater, it's like, we're all in here for the same thing, but I'm trying to figure out what they're doing. They're trying to figure out what I'm doing. And just communication wise, in the collaborative sense, we don't have that. We don't have that boundary. We're able to just look at each other, go, yeah, blue, yeah, yellow, okay, yeah, fabric, or whatever it is. So we're very fortunate in that. And I do believe that really helps the theater's production values stay where they are. So
I think you're exactly right, Bob. And one of the Hippodrome, for whatever reason, has just been graced by something that's very intangible, and it's situations like that it's highly intuitive. I think that we're very fortunate to have a company of actors here that we can pull from. They're not all in Gainesville, but a company of actors that are committed to helping us move forward. And the Hippodrome doesn't just look at the building and just the programs, but also how to nurture the audience, how to nurture artists and artists in the community, because it's such a collaborative art form.
You go to theaters, you freelance in theaters, you go to a theater as an actor, you're a big musical, and you go to the costume shop and they go, here are your shoes. And you're like, is it really my character? These hurt a little bit. Okay, here's an insert. Okay, here's a pad. Get out on stage. Some theaters are like that. We're never like that. We always, especially in the costume shop, because of Marilyn, we listen to in that shop, we listen to the actor and we listen to their ideas of what the character should be to transform their costume. Now, the costume designer designs the costumes, but they're in full communication with those actors. Mm-hmm. If those actors don't like that belt, like we had a new actor to our space in the last show, and he brought up some concerns, and the costume shop listened and tried to help that out. It's a collaborative effort. So we're just not out there putting out a product. It's a real nurturing community of artists that we try. And that's the point. When I bring in young designers, I tell them, we expect you to collaborate. Don't be shy. Fail in the rehearsal room. Don't fail on stage, but fail and we'll bounce ideas off. No ego. You better have a thick skin, and be ready to change on the drop of a dime. But that's really what's important to me in theater, is the collaborative effort and the respect that we give the process. Because if the process is right, the product will be right. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, if my process as a designer is true to the actors and true to the other designers and true to the director, I don't really care what the audience thinks. Mm-hmm. I don't. I'm not in the business to sell tickets. I am. Of course I am. But if I can be responsible, I only have to be responsible for the people in the rehearsal room. The process is what dictates everything. Mm-hmm. Next slide, I think. Is there another one? Yay! So our new sign in the front, I just to go back, and we're going to open the floor to questions. So with this 50th anniversary, we're trying to really open the building up and open, theaters can be so closed, casting, trying to get into a theater, like trying to get into these theaters like Santa Rep, you got to know somebody who knows somebody who, just to get an audition. So we're trying to open the building up to local artists. The sign there was made by ThemeWorks, the company in High Springs. They build things like Disney World and Universal, and they're in High Springs, and they sponsor us for quite a number, a pretty penny every year. So they made that sign, and it all lights up at night. Hector was involved in the pictures, but the front benches, those new front benches, and they're not that new anymore. Well, they were made by Akira Wood. They don't, so that wood, the wood that the benches are made of, were the ceiling joists of Baird hardware. Snap, right? So that's what I'm looking for, to invite artists in. As simple as the new women's restroom that we have on the first floor. Some of us will walk in there and you'll see a beautiful light and an art, and that's by Celino, a local artist here in town, that I was able to get the city to commission a piece during that renovation. So that's really where our push is now, like Nell said, is to really open the building and to bring the community in and to include everybody else, because it's your all's turn. It's somebody else's turn coming up, because some of us are
Who would that be?
getting
Bob?
a little older. We want to pass it on, and we want to pass it off in good hands. So I think that's the last slide. It is great. Do we want to open up to the floor for questions, please? Anybody? Any questions on anything? Yes.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Back when when the government gave money, we actually at one season we commissioned local artists to do a whole line of posters for that season. I forgot what season it was.
It was 19.
Jerry did, right?
Doug Prince did Equus. Mm-hmm.
So another couple of people that were instrumental in the foundation of the Hippodrome and getting it going were Dick and Karen Gornberg. And when they redid their house, they called, were you with me?
Mhm.
They had all these the original posters. First line, you guys probably have a couple. First line run of the original posters from those few seasons that local artists were commissioned to make those, and they donated it all to the Hippodrome. So there's so many, I don't have room to put them, so they're in storage right now at the Hippodrome. But you're right, so those posters, some of those posters, actually we have two of them hung in the new restroom on the first floor, in the new single cell handicap accessible bathroom that we have. We have two posters from those days that are hanging framed in that restroom.
So real quickly, I'd also like to point out Jennifer Pritchett, who is an actor that has been with the Hippodrome for a very long time, and John Moran, who was the photographer for years and years at the Hippodrome. So she was like,
so that show,
thank you, maybe.
No, it's acting. It was acting. That show, that was our show it was in the shop, it was being built, and then COVID hit. So we had built that show. We had to close down for COVID. So that show we've been wanting to do for almost 3 years now. We finally got it on stage this season. So yeah. That was a good one, right?
Yes.
To have Kevin and Nell on stage at the same time.
So fun.
I've got so many stories of Kevin when he was a stage manager and I was running the lights back when I was a young buck. And we were sitting there together. I'm hitting the lights on the computer. Kevin's there. And I look over there and he's wearing this leather suit, this leather thing with a leather cod piece. He goes, "Bob, I got to be on stage. Take over." I'm like, and he's down the ladder, and he's on stage acting, and he's bounding back up, 2 scenes later, and then he's taking over calling the show. So I have tons of memories with Kevin in the booth.
So real quickly, it was, I don't know, about 2 months ago, Kevin got a call from Bob. Bob had to go pick something up, I want to say in Jacksonville or Atlanta or something. You were going to run late. And Kevin was a stage manager at the Hippodrome for years, for a decade, and worked with Bob, as Bob was saying. So Bob said, listen, buddy, can you just call the show? I'll be back, but if I'm not, please. So Kevin said, okay. So Kevin was up there and he wasn't exactly sure when the lights would be, because everything was on computer now and very different. But Kevin said, I was perfect because I had worked so closely with Bob for so many years. I thought Bob would never let this light go. It's gonna be now. And yeah, it was that symbiotic relationship
Oh, yeah.
that the
Well,
artists have for so
Did
many
anybody
years.
see Hair at the Florida Theater when we did Hair at the Florida Theater? So these are back before computer days, and we had a lot of lights up there, and I had two big light boards, two huge light boards that no one person can run. Kevin was the stage manager for that show, so Kevin and I both were running manual light boards, two manual light boards together during the show. So we had to just make sure that the band was together enough that we can follow whatever we were doing.
It worked.
It worked. It worked great. Yes, ma'am. Great.
Yes.
Yes,
As a
there
matter of
is.
fact, I have one right.
Nell has one there, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm not sure, but it should be on our website, thehipp.org. Yeah, it should be there because it's chronicalized. And I'll tell you, the person who really started that archive was Rusty. Rusty really set up our archives
Yeah.
to begin with. Yep. And now we have that was before digital, that was, and then Rusty actually brought us into the computer age. He was our IT person. He had no idea what IT meant or what a computer meant, but he was pretty good at it, and he was able to get us going, 15 years or so in the computer age. And because of that, we do have a solid archive.
And that's Rusty Salling, who played Scrooge, if you don't know who he is, who actually unfortunately died, about 4 years ago?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Yep. Yes, sir.
The image of the control transition from blueprint to actual photos, this like a vaporwave, electronic kind of picture. Is there a plan to like implement an AR, VR, or some advanced digital technology in digital?
Thank you for thinking that.
I'm not sure. Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the question was if there's a way to. So I'm not even sure I'm not sure I understand what. So one thing that we are that we've moved into is for the productions, we've moved into the ability to do projections, advanced projections. So I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about. The image is actually there was the first slide or the previous slide, that one. So what this is our marketing director, Francisca. She took the blueprint, which is the original blueprint. This is today. And then the posterization of the color is the future. So those three elements are supposed to represent the path of the Hippodrome and its circle of how it's growing. So we're always, as far as theater, we'll always have to stay on the cutting edge of technology. As far as lighting and sound goes, the technology has advanced so fast and so far that back in the old days, we really couldn't keep up. But during COVID, President Biden provided funding called shuttered venue grants to theaters across the country. Like the Lincoln Center got like $23 million. It was based on your budget. You got about a third of your budget for any operating costs that you wanted, including salaries. We didn't use it for salaries. We used it for infrastructure. I mean, a third of our budget was 400 and 500, almost $500,000. And so we invested in technology. We invested in projections. We invested in LED lighting on the main stage, in the cinema. We invested in the cinema, better digital projectors, better Dolby sound. We put air conditioners in the shop for the first time ever. Like our scene shop never had air conditioning. New air conditioning throughout the building that are much more efficient. So we use that money in that regard to bring technology, modern technology into the theater. But as artists, we're always looking to use technology. The next show is called Silent Sky. It's going to have a large projection element to it of the universe. That show's about a woman who invented how to measure light and the distance of planets in the 1900s. This is before silent figures, before the movie Silent Figures. This one woman went to Harvard back in the, in the back room, because
1905.
yeah, women weren't allowed to be physicists, astronomers, and she actually she's credited with that, and she was going to win the Nobel Peace Prize, and she turned it down. So that's what this next play is about. And so we're using technology in projection, and the floor is going to light up from internal. So we're trying, anywhere we can, we add it. We don't want to add technology in the production side. We want to use technology that will, like nudity, that will help tell the story, and not just have these projections just for the sake of projections. So I don't think you'll ever see at the Hippodrome us projecting scenery per se. I think you'll see us using it for helping tell the story in a more in a more complex way than just, hey, this is a living room. So
However, it is used in projections are used in the set, but it's a conglomeration.
did anybody see the Mountaintop
Mhm.
when we did the Mountaintop?
Yeah.
How we burned the books. How did we burn the books? Oh, right. So that actually was a huge step up for us. We had a company from New York City come in, 5 Own Productions, and they donated $35,000 worth of services to us. And they, if you saw Fahrenheit 451, that was a great use of scenery projections of that bookcase burning and the movie and everything else that was going on there. That's really not in the original script, but we added that in. So using that, but we brought in an outside designer for that. We're trying. We still don't have the budgets to bring in these big projection designers and things like that. So we're doing it in-house, but that's a great example of that too. But you're going to see technology everywhere in the building. So the simple technology in the galleries and in our lobbies, we used to have these beautiful oak poster cases that we would put posters in. They're now all monitors, high quality video monitors so when you walk in, there's a splash of color on every floor. The sponsors that were on the mirror wall for the benefactors are on a rolling screen now. We're trying to add that look of modern into that old building, which is always a challenge. So, and on that, starting May 2nd, we have another major renovation starting for 3.5, 4 months. The cinema will be closed the whole summer. We're renovating the entire cinema, new seating, new floors, new walls, new ceiling, new screen, new everything, modern. We are redoing all the public bathrooms. Thank you. Right. So, I mean, they were great in 1980. Back in 1980, if you put a handrail up there, that was handicap accessible. That was accessibility. We know that that's not the truth anymore. So we have the new ADA bathroom that's on our first floor that the city put in, but we are sponsoring through our grants that renovation. That renovation will be about a $365,000 renovation for the cinema and the bathrooms, and that should be ready to go by September 1st. So we're going to add some more technology into there. Yes, sir.
Thank you for asking.
That's great.
So the 50 is the 50 years. And then the horse is, if you notice that there are 6 legs on the horse, which mirror the columns and also the 6 founders.
And also our 6 pillars of our mission, our 6 mission
Yes.
pillars. We have 6 different
Yes.
of a hippodrome.
Yeah, the Hippodrome arena.
Right. So the drome is like a cyclodrome. So it's a gathering. I have a poster from the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey. They were advertising in New York City. Come down to the 3-ring hippodrome. The hippodrome, the 3 rings under the hippodrome tent to see our circus in 1920 or something like that. So that's where that comes from. But that horse and the 6 legs, the company did that 60 over 90. There was a branding company that was next door to the Hippodrome for a little while in Randy Batista's gallery. And they do branding for the University of Florida. They do branding for major companies around the world. And they sponsored us and they came up with that logo. We let them, as artists, present that to us. And at that time, the administration said, good, we're rolling with the horse. So that's where it comes from. Yes, sir. So the process is Stephanie Linger, artistic director, brings in, solicits company members. So company members is a designation that we give to members of the artistic community that work with the Hippodrome, that have been with the Hippodrome for a while, that we trust. And Stephanie, as artistic director, picks the 300 plays that she thinks could maybe be there. She hands them out to the committee members. Everybody reads them. They give the feedback. They whittle it down. They whittle it down. They whittle it down. But Stephanie is actually the last call. The artistic director is the buck stops at her desk.
So there's a lot of criteria that go into it because there, back in the day, we could have a show that had a cast of thousands. That is not what we do now. We have certain limitations through our union because we're a union house that dictates the payment, the actors, some of the structure. So Stephanie has to look what's available, what's current, what we can get the rights to, because there are shows that we would love to do.
How much are the rights?
Yeah, how much are the rights? How many cast members? There are obstacles that we face, for instance, housing. If we have X amount of out-of-town actors, now we have to scramble to try to find housing for them. So there's a lot of components that go into just picking out the shows to have as the base to select from.
Right. So we have to have an X amount of equity contracts, same contract as New York, just on a different pay scale, for every show. So we have to have a minimum of X amount of equity contracts based on and if we have over 10 cast members, we have to bring on an equity assistant stage manager and more contracts. Equity is the Association of Actors. It's a union for actors and stage managers across here and also England, and that's supposed to mean that you're really good at your craft. So as a union member, we're only allowed to we have to hire a certain amount of union members per show, and then the rest can be non-union. That union dictates the pay, retirement, health and pension. We have to provide transportation. We have to provide housing, and we have to provide, if they're in town, transportation in town, or guaranteed daily trips to the grocery store, the drugstore, laundry, all that stuff. So the union is there to protect the actors, health and safety, working conditions, cleanliness, safety on the set, handrails, rake, shoes, all those things are part of the union contract that Stephanie has to deal with. Just recently, just to be honest, we took a big hit in our housing. A longtime sponsor pulled housing from us, and so we lost 6 bedrooms. So that means now that happened midstream in the season, so we're still catching our breath from that. So next season, we have to base next season on our housing that we have now, because that housing takes a while to have sponsors that own apartments through town to donate that to us. That's a big donation. Colliers, the Warrens, things like that own a lot of apartments do help us out. But now, so our next season, without that housing, without that guaranteed housing, Stephanie has to pull back on the out-of-town actors. So pulling back on the out-of-town actors means the type of shows we choose. So the type of shows we choose, we have to be able to make sure that we can cast it with our local company or company members that are local, and only have 1, 2, or 3, whatever it is that we can bring in. We also house our interns because they make an educational stipend, so we pay for their housing and their electricity and their internet. So that takes up some. So we're just like, do we need all of our interns next season? So right now we're talking about making some hard choices because our housing got cut, to be honest. So that right now is a major stepping stone for us. But our next season is about to be announced. It's picked. We have the rights to everything. It's an exciting season. We start off with our co-production with the University of Florida. It's going to be a show that you don't want to bring your children or grandmom to. It's about the Trump White House, and I'm just going to leave it at that. Supposedly the Trump White House. It could be anybody's White House, but it's called POTUS. POTU. It's called POTUS. Yeah.
A little teaser.
Yeah. Next season looks wonderful, though. It does. So if you want to be a famous, rich playwright, don't write Hamilton. Write these smaller plays that regional theaters can do that have smaller casts, right? And are a little more simple production values. Not that we do simple production values, but that's really where a lot of regional theaters, COVID changed the world, as we know, and it really changed theater. And if you think about the labor market now in this country and what people are expecting to work now, and it's a whole new world out there that what people expect to get paid and how people get treated. It's all great, but it's really affected theater because theater's always been kind of you're working for the dedication of your art, and the union guarantees certain pay, of course, but that's a big hurdle that we're just trying to navigate through that modern world right now. So our intern program is going through a major renovation because it's just not working for the kids that are coming out of school now. It's just not working anymore for them. So we're going to reinvent that. The only thing constant is what? Change, right? So we got to change.
And that's part of why our doors are open.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes.
I had a wonderful experience. I received a greeting card from a gentleman named Joe Milillo. Joseph Milillo has been the artistic executive producer of Brooklyn Academy of Music for the last 30 years, which happens to be the most progressive theater company in New York City. And he said, Bruce, this is truly a historic moment. The fact that he says, as well as I do, how many professional theaters around the country failed during the pandemic. And for you to be able to have your 50th birthday celebration is truly historic.
Absolutely. So a little historical context. Before COVID, we were running with about 40 some odd staff members. That's staff members. That's not including actors. That's not including that's people that we bring in independently. When at the worst of the COVID, we were down to 6 of us. At the worst of the COVID, we were making 10% of our paycheck. 10%. So we had 90%. The 6 of us had a 90% pay cut, and 90% of nothing ain't much, but the Hippodrome was able to continue paying our health insurance, and they were able to do that. Draconian cuts, obviously, with every theater. A lot of theaters never came to that point that were able to get it down to that staff size and then bring it back up. So right now we're back at around 24 people on staff.
And so that comes with the dedication and the perseverance and the fact that the show must go on, if you will, that those doors will not be closed no matter what. But it's also the support that the community has, that our audiences have, to say this theater is worth maintaining. So we just want to do a shout out. This isn't something that we've just done by ourselves. It is definitely a collaborative.
Right. And to follow that, to grow the theater, to be honored to grow the theater on shoulders of giants, as we call them. But now post-COVID and 50 years later, it's a new world. So now we're really charged with trying to not reinvent, but really invent how this theater can move forward. There's no reason in its right mind why the Hippodrome should ever function in a town the size of Gainesville. Never. So that's our charge. That's our charge. We're figuring it out. So yeah, it's time for the kids to take over. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
No, it's not.
No.
Well, Nell and Bob, thank you so much for choosing.
Thank you.
Thank you for choosing the relatively younger Matheson, which will celebrate its 30th anniversary next year for this great program. It'll be on YouTube, our YouTube channel, in a couple of days. Spread the word. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you all.